You know why you're here. I know why I'm here. Normally, we do this delicate little dance where I say something funny or talk about whatever's on my mind, and eventually we ease our way into the topic with some clever aside. But no, this time we're getting straight into it because the Premier League is introducing a salary cap. So, as an American, as far as I'm concerned, hell hath frozen over. We will be consulting the BBC for this, a company with two definitions, in this case, the British Broadcasting Corporation. They did a nice in-depth dive, and we're going to go through it and talk about what this actually means for the Premier League, because this is still at an exploratory stage. But the first thing you need to know right off the top is they're talking about something that is going to replace FFP in the Premier League, which raises an immediate question for this guy, for me. The question being, there's still FFP in Europe, which means that if you qualify for Europe, which if, England finishes in the top 2 in coefficient ranking, then that would be the top 8 teams. If they don't, it's the top 7 teams. Those teams would then need to comply with European FFP. Well, the Premier League will apparently, at least the way this is being presented early on, will not have its own FFP enforced. It will only be this salary cap. And while you might be thinking, well, the salary cap's probably, it's not. It's not at all. This salary cap, unlike, the kind of salary caps that are negotiated in major American leagues, whether it be NBA, NFL, whatever, this salary cap is not designed to maintain financial stability. But first, what actually happened? Well, 16 of the 20 clubs in the Premier League approved proposals to begin putting together a model for a salary cap in the Premier League. So they have an annual general meeting that happens every summer. I think it's in June. And at the annual general meeting, this proposal, this formula, this system for a salary cap will be presented. This vote was to approve the process of creating this formulae, borrow a SpongeBob phrase, to get a salary cap idea and structure in place, right? Because before you can actually vote on the full thing, you need to know what you're voting on. So this vote was to create an idea, an outline, an actual principle, the legal documents, just spawn in some legalese so that we can actually get this going. And only 16 of the 20 clubs approved it. Some of the usual customers were against it. That would be Manchester City and Manchester United. So before any Manchester United fans pipe in with well, of course Manchester City doesn't want to limit spending, United's involved too. Aston Villa, some reason they opposed it, even though I think they'd be one of the biggest beneficiaries of it, as you're going to come to find out. And Chelsea abstained, mainly because I think they've made so many mistakes in financial matters recently that they probably just figured they couldn't be trusted with any more of them. And that is also a surprising amount of introspection for Chelsea, and I applaud it. Now, this spending cap would include transfers, wages, and agent fees. I am going to assume that somehow bonuses are worked into this too, because anytime you're including the big transfers, wages, and agent fees, you're basically covering every outlay made for player acquisition and retention by a club. So that is what is supposed to be involved in this salary cap. So calling it a salary cap, while it is kind of the same thing, it's not, right? This is also designed to include transfers, so keep that in mind when you see the amount that's being thrown around. Now, proposals have reportedly included spending being capped to between 4 and 5 times the amount the lowest earning Premier League club receives in TV revenue. In case you were wondering last season what that number was, it was Leeds United with £112 million. So we are talking about a lot of money. If you take that and multiply it by 5, you're looking at £560 million. That is still way less than what Chelsea spent on the transfer market not too long ago, right? But this is still an absolutely massive amount of money. And it also comes in place of removing FFP, which means the hard cap would be there for Manchester City and also Leeds. They happen to get brought back in, and some giant billionaire buys them and goes, we're going hard in the paint, and they want to spend all $560 million. They can. That's at least the rough idea, the basic proposal, kind of the outline sketch of the proposal that was voted on by these clubs. And just in case you weren't caught up on the lore, this is in place of something called profit and sustainability rules. It's not actually called financial fair play in the Premier League. Profit and sustainability rules have to do with tying your spending to your revenue, right? This is how Manchester City was allegedly cheating, right? Even though you got 115 charges, that's more smoke than a bonfire, right? This is how they were allegedly cheating, is they fabricated a larger revenue so they could spend at the same level as like Manchester United and Liverpool were spending, even though Manchester City wasn't bringing in as much money because hashtag small club, whatever you want to say, right? So that is the way it works now. But what it would be in the future is a hard cap that is the same for everyone. And that's where BBC brings up this football finance expert named Adam Davis. And he talks about how this could actually be damaging to financial parts of the Premier League. And I don't necessarily disagree with him. He said, we don't know the ins and outs of what the spend cap will include, but our understanding is that the amount that is allowed to be spent is likely to be on player wages, amortization, and agent fees. So amortization is the way they space out transfer payments. If you've dodged that word so far, congratulations. It's a bit of a beast of a word, right? But the word means if I buy a guy for $100 million and sign him to a 5-year contract, that's $20 million a year for 5 seasons, not just a batch $100 million right now. He goes on to say, from a good perspective, that will open up the likes of Aston Villa and Newcastle to spend more than what they currently have, because under the current regulation, it is tied to their own revenues. I got distracted by my own highlighting. It would also mean under new regulation, teams like Nottingham Forest could spend what they want to spend or claim they need to spend to stay competitive. This opens up the obvious potential negative. Leeds, should we have spent all that money? No, but at least we lived the dream, right? Because if you are looking at a team like Manchester City, they're going to be able to float £560 million all day long. Leeds or Sheffield United or, in this example, Nottingham Forest, are not, especially if they get relegated. Parachute payments aren't going to cover a $30 million per year wage on a 42-year-old James Milner if you happen to think that's the best way to stay in the Prem. So I have always kind of been against the profitability and the profit and sustainability rules that the Premier League has had in place, because I feel like they keep the rich rich and the poor poor, right? This does open up and invite almost a really catastrophic level of spending, potentially, right? I mean, we know it's a 4 to 5 times multiple, but this is not the only problem. Like, this is what they brought in finance expert Adam Davis to talk about, right? But this is not the only problem, because there's something else involved in this, right? It's going to be presented for a vote in June. And there's something else nobody's mentioned in this article or any of the other articles that I read. He goes on to say, from a good perspective, that will open up the likes of Aston Villa and Newcastle to spend more than what they currently have, because under the current regulation, it is tied to their own revenues. Okay, I'm getting distracted by my highlighting. He also says it would also mean under a new regulation, teams like Nottingham Forest could spend what they want to spend or claim they need to spend to stay competitive. I think that you can see where the downside is headed here. If you've ever watched that press conference after Leeds basically went into administration, where the guy's going, should we have spent all that money? No, but we lived the dream. Like this dude was playing a game of Football Manager or something, right? The opportunity for other idiots like that to step up to bat, right, and decide to make terrible financial decisions like giving James Rodriguez $75 million a year or something, because they think that's what allows them to stay in the Premier League. Parachute payments aren't, parachute payments are like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole in that situation. Now, I have always been a bit rubbed the wrong way by profit and sustainability rules. I think they keep the rich rich and the poor poor. When you tie what you can spend to revenue legally, like that just seems annoying, right? It seems like something that if you're one of the clubs with the big revenue, you want to keep in place. If you're one of the clubs with the small revenue, you don't. But what profit and sustainability rules do is they keep you sustainable, right? It is really hard to get in financial trouble when the rule says you can spend this much more than how much money you bring in. Now, people still find a way. Looking at you, Die Young at Reading, right? People still go way above and beyond. Looking at you, Todd Bowley, right? If you don't make the Champions League, then maybe some trouble. But to be honest, the more I look at Chelsea's situation, they actually had a ton of money to spend. And who knows, maybe in 7 years, all those wonder kids will come good. But there's something else that's actually addressed in an ESPN article that was basically my first thought here. Is tying the salary cap to the TV revenue will mitigate this issue in some way. But there is no other league in Europe that the Premier League clubs will be directly competing against that are going to be approaching finances the same way. So not only are you reducing your opportunity to maintain sustainability, right? You're opening it up. You're saying everybody has the ability to spend the same amount of money. If some billionaire comes in and buys Nottingham Forest, he can splash the full 560 million, right? But it's not that situation that's dangerous. It's the situation when it's not the billionaire. But I'm getting distracted. I want to talk about that later. What I want to mention here is in Europe, nobody else is doing this, right? And when that is the case, right, you've got these teams that can spend up to 560 million, right? They also have to adhere to European FFP rules, because those still exist. If you're in a European competition, the FFP rules are still there for the European competition, even if they're not still there for the Prem. And Real Madrid doesn't have a salary cap, right? Barcelona doesn't have a salary cap. They're broke now, but they won't be forever. Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Inter, AC Milan, PSG, they don't have a salary cap, right? So if their revenue goes up, if their revenue growth, for whatever reason, new TV deal, the next Messi ends up on one of the, right, their revenue goes up a lot, they can outpace those big clubs. I'm not talking about the leagues, right? The Premier League is going to be the biggest earning league. I don't see that changing in the near future. But you could end up in a situation where the top Premier League clubs, when you're talking about the biggest spending from the biggest clubs in the world, could be held back by this. And that's something that, profit and sustainability rules didn't do, right? Because as long as you are making a boatload of money, which teams in the Premier League are, you can spend at that level. But this might accidentally be an opportunity for the Premier League to shoot itself in the foot in terms of its ability to compete with transfer payments and wage payments with the other big clubs. Like, I get the idea that you want to try and restrict how much can be spent on players, right? Because the Premier League has ended up in a problem. This happened with Harry Maguire. It's going to happen again at Manchester United. It's happened at other clubs as well. Everton's a great example. You give these guys huge wages and you can't move them, right? Arne Slot is going to come in, right, at Liverpool, and he's going to be looking around and he's going to go, what am I going to do here, right? Or Eric Ten Hag's looking around and saying, well, I want to get rid of my whole team. You can't. You can't. Nobody is going to pay them that amount of money. There are 15 to 20 clubs generously in the world that can pay Aaron Wan-Bissaka's wage right now, right? And they don't want him, right? Because he's not, why would you want to pay that wage for that player? Why would you want to get stuck in a situation that Manchester United is already in? And I don't mean to pick on him. I don't think he's even the worst example of that sort of thing, right? Harry Maguire, to his credit, has worked his way back into the team, but there was a time where if Manchester United could have moved Harry Maguire, it would have. But Harry Maguire wasn't getting any enticing offers. He had no incentive to leave because nobody's going to be paying the friggin' wage Harry Maguire is on. And so I believe that this cap is in some way an effort to reduce the impact of the high end of the wages. But it also, the world is bigger than the Premier League here, and it could have a knock-on effect where your Manchester Cities, your Manchester Uniteds, your Liverpools, your Tottenhams, right, even your Newcastles would maybe get outbid. It would certainly be restrained financially in a way that a Real Madrid or a Barcelona are not, as long as they can boost their revenue. Obviously, there's really intelligent people out there making financial models about this stuff, and they're going to be able to project into the future, if it's 5 times the lowest TV income of any team in the Premier League, then the salary cap will always be up there. But the future's hard to predict. If it was easy to predict, we'd all be millionaires off the stock market. So something weird, the moment you set a hard cap for the amount that somebody can spend, no matter how much money they're making, you open up the possibility that you actually give yourself a competitive disadvantage. At the same time as opening up the possibility for stupidity. Because as I was talking about earlier, right, the concern is not Abramovich, City, right, or Saudi Arabia coming in buying Newcastle. The concern is that for other reasons, but financially, Newcastle's not going to go under, right? The concern when you introduce something like this is the guys from Leeds. It's the people that don't have the money to afford hundreds of millions of dollars of transfers and wages. They're just leveraging the fact that they're planning on being in the Premier League. They're trying to spend their way into the next step. That's fun in Football Manager. But if you're working a salary cap like this, it's not so fun, right? I think the best solution, I don't want to just dump on things. I think because I dump on profit and sustainability, then they go to a salary cap, I'm dumping on that too. I think the best solution is if you can prove you have the money, then you can use it. That just seems like the way to go for me. You have to, it's almost like you're taking out a loan or something. You got to put up collateral, right? It's got to be against something, right? You can't just spend money on hope and dreams and good vibes and then run your club straight into administration. I don't know exactly how that would look. I'm not the type of person wearing the power suit that would be able to figure out the exact legalese required in order to make that sort of thing work. But it's always felt fair to me that if you could prove that you had the money, right, you can kind of put something up against it and be like, yeah, I'm good for this. You know, like in 3 years, like we're not going to go bankrupt in this situation. Then you'd be able to spend it, right? And that obviously opens that opens up a whole other can of problems where you got basically mega states like Saudi Arabia stepping in and saying, we're just going to create a freaking super team, which would suck. And that brings us back to a salary cap. Right. And I wish the best solution is to just say, don't be an idiot. But clearly that doesn't work. Idiots are out there. They're everywhere. In fact, I'm one sometimes as well. In fact, just 2 days ago, I was playing rec league soccer and tried to dive across the goal because I was getting rounded. I'm a goalkeeper and my knee hit the ground first. And then I just got like turf burn on my face because I just like whipped my face down into the turf. So that was my idiot move for the week. But at least I didn't bankrupt the Premier League club, right? There's levels to the game. I will try to never ascend to that one. But I will say this for the salary cap. Remarkably simple. So simple. I mean, this is legitimately first grade math here. I don't know when we started doing multiplication tables. Maybe we leveled it up in like third or fourth grade or something. But this is so simple. If I had to explain MLS cap rules to you, we'd be here for an hour, a year even. I was told by a reporter at MLS that I would need a 10-year apprenticeship. He was joking. But I'd need a 10-year apprenticeship in order to learn MLS, cap rules and everything. This is so simple. And I really appreciate that. This is incredibly simple. Its ramifications could be complex, but dude, it took me like 2 seconds to explain it. 4 to 5 times the lowest TV revenue in the league. Boom, easy, done. And I'll tell you what, that's a lot simpler than profit and sustainability too. I don't know what I'd put ahead of the other, salary cap or profit and sustainability. I don't know if there's a situation that is ever going to be able to satisfy me or anyone else where somebody's not getting screwed. So maybe you just have to find the way to screw the least amount of people. With the stupid amount of money the Premier League makes, this might be it. This might be the way to not screw over a ton of people.